Look who's back, everybody. With Tim Wilkin, I'm Mick Gillespie. It's time for the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast. That's where we talk about everything in the world of scouting and baseball and everything else. And we appreciate all you guys for hanging out with us, man. Back again. What's up, Tim?
Yeah, just got back from a Gulf Coast League game with the Yankees and the Phillies over in Clearwater at their complex field. And been a pretty busy week. How about yourself?
You know what? Got off today and tomorrow. The Smokies were eliminated at the end of the first half. Some excruciating losses, so they didn't win the half, but it was some fun baseball leading up to it, a lot of close games. And then, I cut the grass today. I went to the grocery store today. I'm doing sales calls for football, so I'm pretty busy right now. But I know how much people want to hear from you, Tim, and I know that this podcast is so important with everything going on in the world of baseball. So let's get into it, man. You ready to talk some baseball?
Let's go.
Well, look, first off, your thoughts on the red-hot Cincinnati Reds. Elly De La Cruz, who is a youngster, is the hottest guy in baseball right now. He shot up through the ranks in the minor leagues. He tore it up the entire way. The Reds, all of a sudden, they're in first place, and then they're tough to beat. And, the Central and the NL has been terrible, and all of a sudden, now the Reds are the toast of baseball.
Yes, indeed. De La Cruz is a very exciting player. I'm probably not telling the baseball public anything that they don't know, but certainly been fun to watch. You see the fruition of the labor of the Cincinnati Reds scouting staff through the last 5 to 8 years. And some of the guys they've injected into the system, and you still got your skilled veteran in Joey Votto. So it's been really fun to watch, and looking forward to. We're about halfway there now. We're about game 80, I believe. So it'll be very interesting these next 80 games, not only for the Reds, but many of the clubs that are in contention.
Yeah, no doubt. But that's what's kind of working in the game right now. You see a lot of teams, Baltimore and Tampa Bay and the Texas Rangers, now the Cincinnati Reds, that basically gave up a lot of talent that was in the big leagues to go with younger guys. And now you're seeing those teams with the younger players start to succeed.
Indeed, it's been really fun. I've got to look it up, but I got to think the average age of those rosters are uniquely down compared to some of their competitors. So for sure, they're doing a lot of right things.
Well, let's talk about a big story right now that is kind of right up our alley with scouting. Okay. Ex-scouts file age discrimination lawsuit against Major League Baseball. Basically, what the deal is that a group of former MLB scouts have sued Commissioner Rob Manfred, the league office, and all 30 teams last Wednesday. And they're saying that it's age discrimination, and it was reported by the LA Times. Their suit says that MLB blacklisted older scouts, and they used the pandemic as a way of being able to justify that, and also a trend towards analytics. So really interesting. There's 17 former scouts that are 55 to 71 that are no longer employed that have joined this lawsuit. And to be honest with you, there's probably more scouts that would like to be in this lawsuit, but they're kind of afraid that if they do join it, a team won't sign them. If the analytics craze goes away, which is something that we've talked about a lot on this show. But your thoughts on the lawsuit? Do you know these guys? And what does it mean to you?
Well, I'd say I know approximately 8 to 10 guys that they have listed as some of the 17, and known a few of them for many years. And unfortunately, that I mean, you've got guys that are 55, approaching 60, that there's not a lot of options for those particular individuals uh, seeking another job at this age where they're at in their life, and it's uh, it's a little disturbing in the sense because you, you might be toward the end of your scouting career, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of openings as far as those guys getting back into the game, and hence I think they went ahead with it. I know other scouts that have been approached about it and a little leery, or trying to see uh, what's going to come about with this pending lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, um, I've seen the change in the requirements to scout, and honestly, Tim, I mean, this is a good debate to have. I think you and I both kind of sit on the same side of the debate, so it's not really a like we're going to sit here and take up for analytics. I feel like analytics right now is way off the chart. That we have people that look at it way too much, and that we forget that there is a human element to it. But their argument is, hey, I can tell by spin rates and velocities and the different things that they measure. They feel like they can get a pretty good idea of what someone would be able to do in a baseball game. Um, they've devalued the playing of the game in the minor leagues. They feel like they could do all of those things in a complex instead of being out on the road somewhere, maybe to save some money. And then I've seen, a lot less scouts, the guys who know the organizations that they're scouting. There are still some guys out there like that, but they're just not as many. You just don't see as many scouts anymore as you once did. And I wonder if that's because. I mean, could this be true? I mean, could Major League Baseball have said that they don't want? Hey, let's get rid of all the old scouts because they make too much money.
Well, I guess it's an avenue to shave down your budget, but I don't know that to be true, but it's coming out in these findings. It kind of points that way, and I just find I'm more so on the scout side in the sense that what kind of other options do these guys have? It's I think that's kind of pushed these guys into this, and I think the firm that's listed is the same one that won a suit with minor league players here about a year ago, and I think it's the same group. I think they're based out of Dallas, and it'll be interesting. And not only myself, but many people are looking at this, and it'll be interesting to see what comes about with this.
Is there that much money to save from not having lifetime scouts? It just seems like Major League Baseball teams make so much money. I mean, are they saving that much by dumping these guys?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I don't know if it's as much the spending of money as it is do these guys the new wave of scouts, especially from the analytical side. I think they feel they can form uh, these scouts into their their brand that they're trying to sell their owners, and in a lot of cases, a lot of these older guys are traditionalists, and it's you know it's a tough road to hoe. I you know, it was talked about for in a lot of organizations that they can make them work hand in hand, but seemingly it has gone, you know, pretty dominant analytics versus traditionalism. And uh, I mean, it's going to take a few of these clubs to fail to possibly reevaluate themselves and say, hey, what what can we do here to right the ship? And the owners may say, well, we're paying X amount of dollars. Maybe we need to look at another avenue for some of these fallen analytically based clubs.
Right.
So um, I know a lot of people are looking at this and see what happens with these 17 guys. So
Yeah, it's definitely
it's
interesting. When I saw the story, I mean, immediately I thought, we have to talk about this because it's right up our alley. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to do a podcast to talk about the things that are going on in the world of scouting and kind of get into it. Um, it really hasn't, the story came out, but it really hasn't been talked about a lot. Um, it almost feels like, hey, it's out there, and the media is kind of not sure what to do with it.
Yeah, I've seen the article that you alluded to earlier was out of Los Angeles, and I've seen just I read another one that was out of Boston. So, I mean, I think some news agencies are starting to pick up on it a little bit. I think they're just kind of waiting back to see what really happens here, and if you know, see what transpires during this suit.
I mean, could it be? Is it against the law to not hire someone if your philosophy on doing something is different than their philosophy? I mean, I disagree with the way that some of these teams operate, where they have turned their front office baseball player operations into, analytics first and kind of people second. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm just wondering out loud, like, is that against the law? Or, I mean, or teams allowed to pick and choose who they want? I mean, what's the difference between them coming in and saying, hey, we want to, we're going to go get, X, Y, and Z high school coach or softball player that kind of will follow what they're teaching them. I think what it is, Tim, is they go get people that have a lot less experience around the game, and
Mm-hmm.
then they feel like they're easier to mold into what they want because there's no like basis of knowledge that they have in the game of baseball on the professional level. Whereas if you played and you scouted and all this stuff, and you've seen 1,000 games and thousands of games, and you've been scouting, you may already have a preconceived notion on the way to evaluate that they don't want. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and uh, you can see how some of those clubs that are that strongly based in analytics that they want to implement. They want to implement what they think is their game, and uh, it's a fair amount of guys here kind of perished, or so to say, with the traditionalism of scouting, and I guess we'll just see what happens. But uh, I'd be curious to see what goes on here.
Yeah. And, kind of just like one more avenue to talk about is, what do these guys do now? If you were, and you've done this your whole life, you've been in scouting. If one day you show up and they decide that they're going to go get, a softball player and some high school baseball coaches to replace, you and all the guys that are working with you, or maybe some guys that are in scouting but are either less vocal about, the analytics, or maybe they believe in it. Maybe there are these guys, there are guys that think that that totally get the analytics and agree with it. But long story short, what do you do?
Well, I think we're going to find out here soon, but some scouts have converted into analytics to a certain degree. I mean, I think there's still the thought that anyone that's attending games, you've got to kind of report on what your eyes see to begin with. I mean, I know some guys, some of the new scouts are buried into their iPads or cell phones or whatever, and I don't think they see as much of the game, and it's kind of limiting that eye test that's been talked about for many of years. So
Yeah, right.
uh, it's uh, it's a little perplexing at times, but you know it's uh, it's the way a lot of these clubs have taken this avenue and trying to implement it. So uh, I think some clubs, and I think Tampa's one of them. They're analytically strong, but they're also traditionally strong, and
Right.
their player development system for years has been basically based on traditionalism. And so to say all the clubs, I don't know if that's you know the total truth there, but many clubs have gone strongly this way, as you know, and it'd just be interesting to see what happens here coming up with this suit. So
Yeah, really, really. And Tampa Bay's done a great job of developing talent. I think the Atlanta Braves are a fantastic organization, years and years of developing players. And as much as the LA Dodgers spend on talent, they still develop talent too. They don't make a lot of like bonehead trades where they give up their top prospects and and put themselves behind the eight ball to try to win now. So but you know what? You're right. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And if Major League Baseball, which I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, um, which would totally be against the law, blacklisted scouts or anybody, um, then they're obviously potentially going to end up, owing a lot of money. I mean, they've, look, baseball has been in trouble before for similar things. So, maybe that this is true. I mean, that would be terrible because it is so against the law in any field to blacklist people. But, who knows? And just the way they took over the minor leagues, they really used the pandemic to kind of force themselves and um, and basically eliminated minor league baseball as its own entity. But, with that said, legally they had a right to do that. And honestly, there's a lot of things that they've implemented since they've taken over that I like a lot. Like the fact that you can watch our games on the MLB app's cool, and that they are holding teams accountable for the standards of the facilities, which you saw. I mean, you can remember touring around in places like, Hank Aaron Stadium in Mobile or Joe Davis Stadium in Huntsville, or, that ballpark that Potomac had, that was a Reds affiliate. Just some terrible, really terrible facilities, and that doesn't cut it anymore. So I don't know, man. I guess I'm just waiting to see what the next, what the next shoe to drop in this thing is.
yeah, it's certainly going to be extremely interesting from the baseball side, and you and get back on one of the other subjects you were talking about, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Another thing that they've done very well in the last 7 to 10 years, their drafts, they were kind of always known as Latin America kind of a club. They're better players, and draft wise, they've done very well in the last 7 to 10 years. So
Really?
I
Yeah,
wrote,
right. Yeah. They don't miss a whole lot. Guys, as you hang out with us at Cubs Baseball Channel on YouTube or wherever you might be hanging out with us, make sure that you subscribe and like. We're on anywhere you get a podcast. You can listen to us, watch us, but please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to build that up right now, so that we can do the show live and you can watch it live and interact with us. So as we grow our audience, we appreciate you guys for being a part of it. Tim, in the backyard at my house as a kid, my dad would throw me knuckleballs. He loved the knuckleball pitch. It was a passion of him and his brother growing up. They thought it was great. They loved Phil and Joe Necro, Charlie Huff, Hoyt Wilhelm, who was like when they were kids, I guess was like a reliever for Baltimore, and a Hall of Famer. And the Padres just promoted and actually pitched a guy, Matt Waldron, who is the first knuckleballer to debut this year. Did you scout knuckleballers? Did you have a fascination for the pitch like my dad? Your thoughts on the pitch and the fact that we just don't see anybody throw that anymore, hardly.
you rarely do see any of those guys anymore. I'll also throw in Tim Wakefield, who was an everyday drafted as an everyday player by the Pirates, and right before they released him, I guess he always had a penchant of screwing around throwing knuckleballs to his teammates, and someone got the idea over there to put Tim Wakefield on the mound, and it worked pretty good for him as well. But you're right, it's kind of dissipated here in the last 15 to 20 years. Uh, because of the rareness of a guy being a knuckleball pitcher, I don't think a lot of people have a lot to, you know, base a huge history on it, especially in the last 15 years. So it's definitely a lost art. I identifying those guys that possibly might be that next knuckleballer. And I've not got to see Waldron, but must be pretty interesting. But I know, much as you were talking about in your backyard with your dad and everything, uh, you used to see guys, pregame or whatever, warming up, and they were basically loose at the time, and then they started flicking knuckleballs around, and um, it's really a lost art. And I really can't remember too many knuckleballers that had high walk ratios, and they were generally around the plate, although the thing was dancing everywhere, and a lot of hitters were very perplexed, as you can tell by the performances against a lot of those guys. But yeah, that and the palm balls kind of gone out the way. It's kind of archaic
Well,
today.
screwballs too. Screwballs, I mean, which is a great pitch, but it's so bad on your arm. The thing about knuckleball is if you can throw it, you're a lot of times it's your back that goes out before your arm does, and you throw it like 90% of the time. I mean, it's like when you don't throw it, it's amazing. Like these guys throw this pitch, some of them throw it really hard, but most of them don't even throw it very hard. Like it's between 85 and 75 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, I know some guys decreased purposely to, you know, lessen the velocity, and I think they probably got more action off of it. I can remember I was with Toronto Blue Jays, and we were advancing, and it was the National League Championship in '92, which Wakefield was there, and it was just amazing uh, to to watch the hitters trying to figure out that pitch, and it would be nice to see if a couple guys could come back and and see how baseball people or the 30 franchises, how they would handle in trying to pursue that style pitcher. It's
Yeah.
definitely a lost art for sure.
You're talking
Uh,
about Toronto. They had R.A. Dickey. But yeah, I think he was drafted by the Rangers, right? And then had some arm issues or something. I mean, do you remember that? And he
oh
became
yeah,
a
I remember
National
very
League
well.
Cy Young Award winner.
He had really good stuff. Uh, very good competitor. Great feel for pitching. Loved him as an amateur there at the University of Tennessee, and got to see him in some USA baseball, and then he hurts the arm and kind of reinvents himself. And he did have a pretty long career even after injuring that arm. But if the screwballs, and there's some probably old timers will tell you if that screwball's thrown the way it's supposed to be, there shouldn't be as much torque on the arm, but some guys have to get that torque, and I think that's where you alluded to it earlier. There's been a fair amount of injuries to those guys after they adopted that pitch.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with Waldron. I think Baltimore had a guy do it a few years ago, but it didn't last. It They're fun pitches to watch, and you're right. Like you used to see guys throw it before the game, like mess around with it. Now I feel like they throw footballs or kick soccer balls. Like you just don't see them messing around with that pitch as much. But um, it's a really fun pitch to throw, and it's just so much different than anything else that's out there. And I feel like with the way that the game is right now, if someone came in and had a great knuckleball and could control it, I think they would be extremely successful.
Uh, no doubt. I mean, you take any one of those guys that we've mentioned earlier, and if you could get any guy close to that if you could find that knuckleballer that had pretty good control and decent command, uh, I mean, that guy means more innings wise to a major league club because you can sit there and throw 125 pitches in a game and not really worry about injuring this guy's arm because of the lack of velocity. So, I mean, I think that would be a welcome addition to some staffs that have potential arm problems or guys that don't clubs that don't have particularly good depth in their starting staff. Uh, that guy could be immensely valuable to that club if you get a guy anywhere between 175 to 200 plus innings. Boy, what a relief on the starting staff. So
Yeah.
maybe someone comes around. I'm not aware of guys throwing knuckleballs except for the guy you brought up, Waldron. Uh, yeah, be interesting to see if there is a next one, and hopefully, maybe a trend would be to start back, messing around with that pitch a little bit more. I don't know if clubs kind of try to push that thought away because you don't have as many instructors now that
Hmm.
kind of help those knuckleballers along, and probably not many familiar with the pitch to possibly help that pitcher out a little bit.
They're experimenting with the automated strike zone in AAA, and I got a feeling that it'll be in the major leagues sooner than later. I for one, Tim, I'm going to tell you, I can't wait for it to get there. Watching baseball night after night, my entire life, I feel like there's just a missed pitch at the wrong time costs you the game, and I hate the human element. I'm just going to tell you that. And I'd love to hear what you think about it. I hate it. I don't want the human element. I just want them to get it right. And I wonder, like, when it comes to things like knuckleball pitchers or any pitcher for that matter, how does that having like an accurate strike zone, that it's the same strike zone every single game, how would that benefit or hurt a pitcher? And do you think like say a knuckleballer? I mean, would that even factor in with that pitch?
That's there's a lot of arteries that can come off of that, but I'd have to know more about what's going into that and how it would be implemented. And I'm not against it, and I'm just trying to figure out uh, all the avenues that might take. So maybe if it's cut and dried, uh, I could be persuaded to lean that way. But it's they used it a little bit, I believe, last year in the Florida State League, and they were having a lot of problems. Um, Sometimes getting, if they would challenge the pitch, they were having quite a bit of time in between making that conversion. So you're going to have to, um, uh, they're going to have to tone that up a little bit because it's for me to be on that side of the coin. But I'm not against it because I'd like to see a little bit more of it,
Yeah.
especially if they're going to put it in the major leagues.
Are you a human element guy? Do you like the human element?
Uh, I, I've kind of like what the replays have done for baseball, getting those calls right. And we had the young man that had the no hitter with Detroit, lost a perfect game.
Yeah, Galarraga.
Yeah. And if, if that, if you had to replay, would he had had the perfect no hitter? I guess you would say yes. Yeah, I like it for that part. I like most of the time it takes to get it done. It's not a real long process. So, um, yeah, I can be persuaded. I just got to see all the things involved in doing that.
Yeah, good point. Well, it's coming. It's coming with all of these other changes. If you had a chance to look at the game without, the changes this year, where the pitch clock, the shift, no more shifting, and the bigger bases, your thoughts on those rule changes for this year?
Uh, I wasn't quite sure when they did the thing with the shifts because I mean shifts have been coming from they were used in the 40s and 50s with Ted Williams, and they would always use the shift on him. Uh, I've kind of liked what I've seen the results on the shifting part. Um, what was the other two things you mentioned? I got to
The
scroll
pitch clock.
here. Uh, I'm good with the pitch clock. I know there's
Did you
been
think the game was getting stale? I mean, did you kind of feel like having the really long games was starting to affect people as far as their attentiveness, or was that something that you really didn't care, but it's nice to have it go faster?
well, I think for the fans, more importantly, uh, it keeps their concentration level going or being much better than it was in years past. To
Right.
get the patent 3 hour, 3 hour and 15 minute games, sometimes 3.5, even longer at times. But I, I really like the pace of the game. Um, the bags, I haven't quite got to what I really think. I do like the fact that they're stealing more bases. I think they've got maybe a half a foot difference. Uh, their the analytics departments, a fair amount of them like to 80%. I always thought 75% was good, and we have lost a stolen base for many years. Now all of a sudden, quite a few guys are running and very successful. And I kind of like to see the catcher challenge behind there. So I do like that. And I love the pace and no shifting now. So although you see some pretty pronounced within their parameters, the shifts, I mean, you see a shortstop almost over second base on some hitters, but it's, excuse me. Um, yeah, so I'm in for the most part. I still need to uh, see how this thing's going with robo umps. So,
Yeah, that's the next thing. But look, Tim, until they put the ball in play more,
yeah,
it says all this other stuff's not going to matter. I mean, you're talking about a ton of strikeouts and walks. And I mean, I watch it every night. It's like, they don't have the pitch to contact guys. They don't want them pitching anymore. They want everybody to strike out.
yeah, from both sides of the ledger. So, I mean, just what you were talking about earlier with the guys that could throw strikes but still get outs, and some some pitchers are just built that way, but they have just enough movement to keep it off the barrel of the bat. Uh, and unfortunately, I think some of those guys are getting lost in the shuffle, and that's mostly with starters, relievers, or more of them are probably throwing harder than they ever did. Um, I don't know. It's it's you're seeing a lot of velocity, but uh, not as good command.
Right,
And
right.
I think
Let me
that's the
ask,
result of that.
yeah, look, and let me ask you this. Jody Davis did a game with me on the Cubs TV network, a Smokies game, and he said that he felt like the guns were just a little bit different than the ones that when he played. He's watching guys throw, and before he felt like same speed. Now, instead of being 91, it's 95. Maybe 4 or 5 miles an hour difference in the gun itself. That maybe the guys aren't. Everyone isn't throwing as hard as the gun says, or maybe the guns before weren't as accurate. Do you think that's the case, or my theory on this is, and I was talking to one of my buddies that pitched for years last night about this. I feel like when we were coming up, which I don't even want to say it was that long ago, but I mean, we didn't have instruction with former professional players. We just went out and played, and now you talk about travel ball, you got legitimate coaching, you got instruction. At the high school level, your baseball coach was really just like the PE teacher that liked baseball. You're lucky if you got anybody that really knows the game. Now I feel like they hire guys who really know the game. And it's just a different, not saying everyone. I mean, I'm not trying to say everyone was like that, but, looking back now as a guy that has spent his entire life in baseball, it's kind of laughable to think about the credentials of some of the coaches that were coaching back when I was playing, or, teams that were, that I didn't make maybe, compared to, what we see today. And I mean, I feel like that technique may be why guys are throwing harder. I don't know. You tell me. I mean, do you think it's the guns, technique, combination, something else?
Definitely a combination. I can remember my first years as an area scout, and I think back then it was 26 clubs. So I was in the early, well, 79 all the way into the middle part of the 80s. Out of the 26 clubs, you might have only 10 clubs that had radar guns. And then there was
Wow.
two different two different kinds of radar guns at that time. One was the Jugs gun, and the other one was called the ray gun, spelled R-A. And the ray gun was 5 miles an hour slower than the Jugs gun. And on the ray gun, uh, so they reset what an average fastball was. And on the ray gun, it was 85 miles an hour. On the Jugs gun, it was 90. So those were roughly their average fastballs at that time. I I could see the guns being different. He spoke to that side with Jody that he thought, he knew what the velocities were back when he was playing. I think he could be right to to some degree, but I don't know if they've got those radar guns, uh, much to the chagrin of a lot of scouts and then pulled over by policemen and stuff and wondering about their radar. So a lot of those guns that were used in those years were used in police vehicles as well. So I, I don't know if these guns since the middle '90s, where I've seen a upward trend of velocity. I don't know if the electronics are totally 100% on those guns, but you know you're seeing sometimes three, four guys on a staff that are touching 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
My goodness, the College World Series here recently. I can't remember his name. He's now with the Angels. Got called to the big leagues. Is it
Ben Joyce. Ben
Joyce.
Joyce. Yeah, he threw 105 miles an hour at Tennessee.
Yeah, I got to see him. University of Tennessee played at Florida last year and got to see Joyce pitch. And everyone's guns in that area were basically about the same, and he was as high as 103 that day.
Wow.
And uh, you just, you know, maybe it's a mile or two faster than guns were 20, 25 years ago as far as the calibrations on these guns, but um, it, velo's the thing right now, and the hell with control and command. And
Yeah, right.
it's you talked about all these guys. Walks are up, strikeouts are still up. Uh, it'll be interesting to see uh, some hitters this year that you can see have kind of made some changes at the plate, but we still got the high number of strikeouts, and that's a little bit dismaying there. Um, and I think that some of that comes from player development, and uh, maybe should be preached more about putting the ball in play, especially late in the count when you need to move runners over. Um, so it's definitely still a problem. I don't think any of the new rules have much of an effect on the hitters themselves as they're sitting in the box hitting.
Right.
It it's got to be done in player development. It's got to be done in scouting prior to player development in college and high school. So um, I'm more on the contact side, but here we go again. Every ball is measured how hard they're hit.
I know. Right now.
So
Right now.
now, yeah, this
People
guy.
that try to argue that Greg Maddux wasn't a great pitcher in the playoffs because too many balls were put in play. And the analytics tell us if the ball's in play, it has a chance to get a hit. You want somebody to strike out everybody. Um, How about this final topic for today? And I'm just going to stay on the same thing. Reports are that Major League Baseball is meeting with teams right now and talking about limiting the amount of money spent on technology. That they want to kind of have like some sort of a window that says, hey, you can spend up to this. Where teams are, some teams are spending a lot more than others, or you're forced to spend a ton of money on technology to keep up with everyone else. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that 25% or there's 20, sorry, not percent, 25 clubs that are putting a lot of money into this. And um, is it an unfair advantage, or are you putting yourself in that situation where you're not competing with the electronics of the game? So if if there's, it's going to be a hard one to monitor too. So, like if each club is budgeted X amount of dollars, are they going to be, some of those rules might be fractured because, someone's going to give them some unseen money underneath the table, and they come up with more what they think is an advantage. And um, I, I, I think it's a pretty good idea as far as limiting clubs, but I'm sure there's ways to work around it as well.
Yeah, well, they said it was, it was that, and maybe, maybe even limiting the amount of money you can spend on scouting, kind of along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe they need to do that. I mean, because you can imagine. I mean, you walk into a big league clubhouse and it's like they have a command center in there. Which is crazy if people have never seen it before. I mean, it's nuts. They got people working cameras and monitors and this and that, and and I don't know that baseball was ever supposed to be this. I don't know that it was ever supposed to be. We're stealing signs from center field cameras, and we got all this technology. We got guys looking at an iPad during the game to figure out what they didn't do in their last at bat and all this stuff. I mean, I don't have a problem with stealing signs if it's the runner at second base that's stealing it. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the way that it's always been done, and that to me is part of it. If you can't hide your signs, but to have cameras and this and that, and it, I feel like baseball. They've experimented with the balls this year, last year. I get it. Trying to find out like the perfect baseball. Japan does that too. They actually deaden the balls more. They like the lower scoring games a lot more than we do, I think. Um, I know that they're looking at a lot of different ways to try to fix the game right now, which I think is a good idea. But with that said, some of these ideas are going to be duds too. And it just seems like when they slotted the draft, that was the beginning of baseball really doing a lot of things, cutting minor league teams. Like, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like they make money hand over fist, but they're always like, they're just doing a lot of things that you would think they're not making money that make them look cheap.
Yeah, it's one wonders, what's going on there, and it is what it is. Uh, it's a I don't think a club. I mean, if they're going to implement it, then everyone needs to be the same, and I mean electronics wise. So I just don't think that's fair to some clubs that may not want to spend that money, but maybe it's telling you you need to get in line and catch up as well. So
Right.
uh, yeah, it's probably have to hear more on that too, because I just would wonder what all this entails.
Yeah, what'd you think of Oakland going, pretty much moving to Las Vegas in the process right now?
Yeah, I guess it's come time. You know, it's really tough times out there. I think the Coliseum's probably a little outdated. They, a lot of everyday players are probably happy as can be because of all the foul ball territory they have there in Oakland. But and seemingly, Las Vegas is ready for a major league club. They're going to have to put up a structure here somewhat quick, and I think possibly that opens up. There's talk of expansion coming down the road, possibly in the next 3 or 4 years. So
Where do you
I,
think gets the affiliates? Where's the commissioner Tim Wilkin putting these expansion teams? Because I'm with you. It's coming. They want to add two more teams, even things out.
yeah, I've always liked Nashville. I think they're definitely ready for it, and I'm sure that I'm guessing, not completely sure, but I got to think that's one of the avenues that they're considering is going to Nashville. Um, I always thought Salt Lake City might be a place
Really?
to think about, and I think Charlotte probably you need to look at that, but you may be running into some problems with geographics with the Atlanta Braves, and all of a sudden now they're going to give up Nashville. Can you put Charlotte in there too? And it's going to give up some of their other fan base. So
Right. Plus, it seems like they always want to put a team out west and then another, to match the teams in the east. Even though they're really in the south. But
but
yeah,
with Oakland going out to Vegas, that was one of the proposed Western clubs. So that's why I kind of threw Salt Lake in there. I'm
yeah, yeah.
not sure
Be
if
good.
they're, you know,
Yeah.
I think Portland's too close, and I think the NBA found their problems with when they had the Seattle Supersonics and the Portland Trailblazers at the same time. And I don't know if that's too close. People say
Yeah. Right.
Portland, so
I don't. I mean,
and I
they've
don't
got
think
so many
Sacramento.
issues right now.
I don't
Yeah.
think Sacramento's the other option. So that's
No. Or Austin, Texas. I'm thinking the only place that you didn't mention was Montreal or possibly Vancouver, but probably Montreal because they had a team and people want to bring a team back there again. And, that'd be interesting. But I think Nashville's got to be number one.
yeah.
The Athletic did a survey of players. They overwhelmingly picked Nashville as that next spot. So being a guy that spends a lot of time in Tennessee, I got my fingers crossed that we get our own team here sometime soon. All right, Tim, anything else before we wrap up the show for today?
I got a little tidbit from my years as an area guy. I was just looking for this season here that we have 136 new players their first games in the big leagues. That's the equivalent of, you're saying 26-man teams now. So that's the equivalent of 5 teams worth of new players coming in the game. It kind of took me back to my early days, and there was many a guy that you swore that could play in the big leagues if they just had this opportunity or that opportunity. When I was an area guy, uh, we signed this guy named Otis Green. And Otis played for, before you were there, for Knoxville. He played roughly 6, 7 years in the Toronto Blue Jays system, and then played another 12 years in the minor leagues. Now, here was the thing with Otis. Otis was on the 40-man roster with the Toronto Blue Jays for 3 years. He was an outfielder, first baseman. As an amateur, he pitched. So he would come to me all the time and say, should I start pitching? And I always thought Otis would play enough, and I thought his bat was good enough to play in the big leagues. Well, he was on the 40-man roster, as I said, with Toronto 3 times. Then tried to play the next year. And this was before they had 6-year minor league free agents. So these guys were kind of stuck, could never play. So Otis decides to start pitching. Well, for 2 different other clubs, the Angels being one, and I'm not sure the other one, but Otis gets on the 40-man roster 3 more times and still has to have the record of being on 6 40-man rosters to never play 1 game in the major leagues. And I was looking
That's
at
crazy.
6 times on the 40-man roster, didn't get 1 at bat or 1 inning pitched. I think he won 13 in AAA one year. He hit 285 at Syracuse. But I was looking at all these new players that have got to the major leagues this year, and I don't know if you would have 60 to 100 acquisitions in a year back in the 80s and 90s, and we're halfway through the season. We have 136 guys getting their first action in the major leagues.
Yeah. Give us your scouting tip of the day.
Oh, gosh.
Give us a good scouting tip.
Oh, geez. Gosh. And I know you warned me about this earlier, and I think old timers or some timers is kicking in, but scouting tip of the day.
You get somebody that's green, they're just getting there, you're taking them around. You know, what are the things that you're teaching?
Well,
these,
I would say for the newer scouts, and we talked about watch the game. Well, that seems simple enough, but if we'll go to the pitching side of it, and if you can see a pitcher has, questionable command and control, watch his body control all through that outing that you're watching him pitch. Watch him walk, watch him catch the ball in between pitches. And I think it'll tell you something about that guy if you start getting a little more honed into these guys, whether they have the body control to repeat the delivery, to improve that command and control. And just keep your eyes on the guy's athleticism or lack thereof.
Very good stuff, Tim. Well, it was fun. That's a good one. I think that's a great way of looking at it. I mean, you can glean something off of them even when they don't pitch the baseball. That's what you're saying. You know, somebody that's wobbling all over the place, they might not be able to do anything twice.
Yeah, they may throw the ball 100 miles an hour, but they will never have the body control to implement it.
Nice. He's Tim Wilkin. I'm Mick Gillespie. Make sure that you guys follow us on YouTube at Cubs Baseball channel. This is the start of a lot of different things I'm going to do on the channel. And Tim and I are going to keep on talking scouting. The MLB Baseball Scout Podcast, available audio anywhere you get your podcast. And thanks for hanging out with us again, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, Mick.